Florida State got absolutely shellacked, obliterated, bamboozled by Georgia in the Orange Bowl, and could quite possibly go down as the most embarrassing loss in college sports. Can we just all take a moment and use
silence?
one word to describe this historic defeat for the Florida State Seminoles? I will start with disgrace.
Expected.
I'm going to say unfortunate. And the reason why I'm saying that is they had 29 players opt out. 29
I didn't realize that until recently. Yep.
Yeah, 29 scholarship players opt out. Now,
that's a problem.
Right. For one of two reasons. They got fucked over and they were pissed. Said, okay, I'm not we didn't get in. Like, why even risk injury at this point? Even if I'm coming back next year, going to the NFL draft. And then obviously the second reason is the NFL draft. But for what? You know what I mean? Like, there's nothing on the line. Georgia played the game like it meant something. And I think they came out to prove a point that if they were in this thing, they're probably favored in every fucking game that they play. And to be honest with you, I don't know if you're going to talk about this later, but I think they roll every team that's in that thing. So, as for Florida State, it sucks. I'm actually shocked they landed the Oregon State quarterback in the transfer portal.
DJ, teasing everything that I have.
Oh, are you? Dude, I'm so sorry. I don't read. Go ahead.
No, I mean, obviously, I think now, though, you bring up a good point. I think now is a good time for a little quick 5-second moment of silence because it was very embarrassing, especially as a Noles fan. Deepaw, you too. You're a Noles fan, too. So we'll take a 5-second moment of silence.
Moment of silence is supposed to be sacred for a death.
Yeah, they died. They died on that field, dude.
They died on the field. Honestly, it might sound a little harsh, but I just think that you can't make such a big deal about not getting into the college football playoff and then play against Georgia like that. I know some players sat out, but still, what was the score? It was like 63 to 3 or something like that.
But think about just that pure number. That's just depth, and you're going against arguably the most talented and deepest team in college football in probably the last couple of years. Maybe a couple Alabama teams would be up there. But yeah, it's that's way too many players to field a competitive team. And even if it's not your starters, you're still starting a guy. I believe it was his first start, going against that defense.
I mean, do the simple math. How many guys are on that roster?
I think, 85 or 80 scholarship players or something like that? It was basically a third of the roster, I thought, yeah.
So think about how many players on Georgia backups that would start on another Division I football team. But because they're at Georgia, right. So you have a bunch of young guys that got spot time this year going up against Florida State's second, maybe third string guys who didn't play a snap all year.
And got thrown into that, yeah.
And got thrown into that, right? Like, it wasn't a surprise Georgia covered the over by themselves. Everyone talked about Florida State's defense, blah, 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 blah.
You called that.
With who they didn't have play, they had no shot. Now, having said that, I disagree. If I'm a player, I disagree with the idea of sitting out. I think it's cowardice. I don't want to say it's – I'll just say it. I think it's pussy shit, to be honest with you. Like, if I'm playing for my boys and we're raising hell about us getting shafted, I'm playing in that game to prove a point. And they chose not to do it.
You see,
my wife just brought this up recently too, and she was it was because we were watching the Ohio State game, and it was Marvin Harrison Jr. And obviously most talented player in football right now coming into the draft. All the offenses basically ran through him, and Ohio State, I think, put up 3 points against Missouri. But she was kind of talking about that, and my point was, if you're the top 1% of those players, I understand it. It's a purely financial decision. Even if you take out one of those large insurance policies for $5-10 million, that's still less than one contract you would receive in the NFL. So yes, you do get money out of that. I'm talking about the very top players. those other 28 or 29 players at Florida State, those guys probably aren't first-round draft picks. So, yeah, you might be getting ready for the NFL, but you can still put out good tape against arguably the best football program in the country.
And that's where I think the missed opportunity is for me, is if you're a third, fourth-round guy and you're flying all over the field, making every play, every other tackle, you know what I mean? Like, I'm climbing up somebody's draft board. So you opted not to do that. Okay, then this is the problem with college football for me, and thank God they're going to the 12 teams next year, because when we're doing that bowl pick'ems, it's almost pointless. Like you're shooting in the dark. Like you got to Google like who's sitting out in this game.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm not a huge fan of it. I see both sides, but as a competitor, there's no way I'm sitting out. Like if the two of you are like, I'm playing.
Yeah.
It's a sticky situation for sure. I think that the players were just thrown into an uncomfortable situation that nobody wanted to be in for sure. I get it though that I can't name the players off the top of my head that like sat out because there was a lot, but I'm sure some of them were looking forward and are anticipating on getting drafted this year. And let me tell you, if some kids, that's their dream, they don't want to mess that up over some meaningless game, I guess, in their eyes. But if they did end up playing those 29 players that did sit out, Georgia still wins this by a landslide. I mean, Noles didn't have really a shot.
It would have been more competitive. It wouldn't have been a blowout, but I think everybody in America knew, even though I took them in our bowl pick, I think that was more of a pride thing. With 21, I think 21 points was, they weren't winning that game.
And that was the point of what I was trying to tell you guys. If Travis is healthy, that team is completely different. Their quarterbacks that they have are atrocious. And it's obvious because they go out and they land a fifth-year senior in the portal. Or is he a fifth-year senior? I think he's a fifth-year senior.
I don't know if he's fifth, but he does have 1 year left.
He's got 1 year left?
Yeah, he's got 1 year eligibility.
Yeah, so it just shows you the confidence level they have in that quarterback room if they're going out spending X amount of dollars on a transfer portal quarterback.
I mean, so Houdini, brings us our next topic up, though. I mean, where does FSU go from here? They have a lot of players that are actually leaving that already went into the transfer portal. You have some guys that are going and declaring to go to the NFL draft. This team is going to look vastly different next year. They did get a new QB. I'm not even going to try to pronounce his last name. We'll just call him DJU for these purposes. But he's in line to replace Jordan Travis, played for Oregon State last year. The 2 years prior to that, he played for Clemson. Is this their guy?
It's got to be.
Yeah, he had a big bounce back year transfer from Clemson. He was the heir apparent to Trevor Lawrence, arguably one of the most polished prospects coming out of college at the quarterback position. So there was a lot of hype, and he was a player of the year for whatever state he was in. He was a hell of a ball player, but really struggled at Clemson. Had a great bounce back year this year at Oregon State. I think he's going to do really, really well with Mike Norvell in that offense. So as far as plugging in any player in the country, probably the best quarterback on the transfer portal, in my opinion.
I still think that FSU competes for the ACC in the ACC next year because, Miami is just always going to be Miami and never really live up to anything. And I think that they get by Louisville. I think that they compete. But do you think that FSU will ever get out of the ACC? A few weeks ago, it was a huge conversation. It's going to cost them about $572 million just to leave. And they want out badly. Let that be put on the record. It looks like it won't happen, but they're for sure going to make a try at it.
I think to comment on what you were talking about before, they do land 22 commits for the 24 class, in which it's good enough for 10th in the country. So as for bringing in high school talent, that's good. Are they going to stick with high school players? I doubt it. Right? They've already shown that they're going to go through the portal. So they'll land a couple guys through the portal that were probably playing at mid-majors. They're going to take a step up. As for the ACC conversation, and I've been saying this for a long time, it's when you look at each sport, like everyone always talked about the Power 5. It's not the Power 5, right? You have like a Power 3.5, right? You have the SEC, you have the ACC and Big 12 is pretty much one. And then the Pac-12 and the Big 10 is pretty much one. And then all the other teams that you could possibly talk about are lumped into that half, right? So the Big Ten, and this is where the shift really happens, right?
The
This
Big
is where
Ten West, baby.
Yeah, Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State. Obviously, you have like your Michigan States, all that stuff, but you're going to have USC, UCLA, Oregon, and Washington joining that. You want to talk about an absolute powerhouse, not only to mention you already have
That's a conference, bro.
Yeah, you already have the SEC, which now you're adding Oklahoma and Texas, which this is what has been being teased in college football for a long time.
Oh, yeah.
Now it's going to shift over to basketball and baseball and all that stuff. But when you start looking at like the NCAA realignments, it's strictly because of this Florida State situation where your strength of schedule, your wins against ranked opponents, all that stuff really matters. So if you're not playing in a conference that is respected, you have to go into a conference, even if that means you take it on the chin for 4 or 5 years. That's what you have to do. So looking forward at these conferences, with it going to 12 teams, you may not see a mid-major in there at all for God knows how long. And that's my problem with the entire thing right now. Is like, thank God we have it, but like Notre Dame is technically an independent, but they're affiliated with the ACC. Yep. It's just like, I don't know, dude. It's a scary situation when you start including the NIL. This is a bad situation, bad fucking situation.
Do you think that eventually maybe some bigger teams will go to the ACC? You still have Florida State, Duke is there, Miami's there. Will they recruit to try to make the ACC a powerhouse one day? Or is the ACC just going to obliterate itself eventually?
It's why the ACC is the weakest conference, Jedi, is purely about their TV deal. The ACC network sucks, and it doesn't bring in nearly as much revenue as the other big networks do. So immediately you're getting way less money. And in this day and age with TV rights deals and sports deals exceeding billions and billions of dollars, it's all about cash. That's what all this crazy realignment is. And they have, the smallest gun at the table per se. Like they don't have any bargaining power with all these big teams.
Well, that about wraps our conversation up for Florida State. Georgia, congrats on absolutely obliterating the Seminoles. A moment of silence again.
I do think they get out though.
They have a pretty. They do have a pretty ironclad. The ACC has a pretty ironclad agreement, like that all the schools sign. Like I think Jedi said, it's going to cost like $300 million, but it's a lot of quid.
You go to the SEC, you're going to make that back.
Yeah, they also have the state backing them up, Florida, which will be interesting.